Everybody, this is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with you all today here at the facility where just moments ago Mark Davis introduced John Spytek and Pete Carroll. I've got a ton of observations to give you um, about Spytek, about Carroll, about Mark Davis. I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping here, real quick. Very excited to announce on tomorrow's podcast, dropping at SI at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and then on is going to be an exclusive interview. Middle linebacker Robert Spillane, Raiders linebacker Robert Spillane, heading into free agency, but he's going to be on the podcast tomorrow. I've known him for 11 years now. Great guy. And I'm really excited to talk ball with him. I'm going to get his thoughts on Pete Carroll, his thoughts on Patrick Graham, Robbie Leonard staying with the Raiders. Is that a desire of his heart? What's he looking for if he's going to stay? And looking at free agency in totality. But I'm especially going to ask him about something I've never told you about, and it was about a moment when he really fell in love with Raider Nation fan base. I'll tell you about it. It's a moment him and I shared in the locker room in his first year, but I've never talked about it publicly because he's not that kind of guy. But I'm going to ask him about it. We're going to talk about it. So make sure you check out tomorrow's podcast, if you would please, with Robert Spillane. I think you're absolutely going to love it. And um, now, I want to dig in with you about this. Let's start with John Spytek. You may remember I think today's Monday. Yeah. So 15 days ago, I told you that John was the leading candidate, that he was the front runner, that they obviously looked at Newmark because that was who Ben Johnson wanted. But told you all along, didn't mean that Spytek wasn't the front runner. Now, in the interest of fair disclosure, I have known John for 25 years. 2004 is the first time I met him. He was an intern for the Lions, and I'm sitting in Bill Keenan's office. By the way, I talked to Bill about this the other day, and we had a good laugh. But who was a longtime executive with the Raiders, and uh, Matt Millen was there, and Sheldon White, one of my dear friends who interviewed for the GM job here, who's with Pittsburgh. But um, and Spytek comes in the room, and we'd been having a pretty deep conversation. And I don't remember if it was Millen or Sheldon, but one of them asked Spytek a question, and he just rattled off the answer. And when he left the room, the whole conversation was that kid's a whiz kid, and he's going to go a long way in this. He just needs to tap the brakes and understand it's not going to happen tomorrow, but he's a whiz kid. They told me about how if they gave him two jobs, he'd get four done. If they said to him, get us all the details about X, he'd bring you all the information on X, Y, and Z and do it in the same time most people did a half butted job on X. That's just his nature. He's had kind of star written all over him. So obviously I kept very close eyes on him when I was in Detroit. And then he moves on and goes to other places where he always kept an eye on him because, and one of the things about him is he was and is a tremendous listener. He knows how to listen to get every detail. I explained it many, many years ago before I even came to the Raiders. A friend of mine who is a relative of an owner of an NFL team asked me, his team was looking for a general manager. He goes, who do you think is one of the best up and coming young ones? And I shared him at the time, Dave Ziegler and John Spytek. Um, John is just a great listener, and it has helped him to go a long ways. Players feel like they've been heard, even when he doesn't do what they want. Coaches feel like they've been heard. But I told someone years ago when I recommended him for a job, um, I said, That guy's wife has to be the happiest woman in the world because no man listens like him. He's phenomenal. The Raiders got a great deal in getting Spytek. Now, I'm going to say something right up front. I've said this since last year, and I stand by it. And now other people are saying it, but I said it first. Tom Brady has a massive or a huge voice. He is the guy in charge of football operations. It's not his title, and there's going to be other people, but really that's who it is. And so it's going to be fascinating for me to watch. Spytek is a detail oriented, good listener. And I'm going to be interesting to watch how, and even though him and Brady are very close, does Brady allow him to do his job or does Brady micromanage him? I don't think we'll know that for a while because they're close and because they have such similarities. I think it was a perfect marriage. I think if Tom would have kept Tom Telesco, just because I asked Tom Telesco if he had any relationship with Tom Brady before he came to the Raiders, and he said no. And to me, when I asked him that question, it was because I knew what Tom was like to work with. And I use the term synergy not to sound like a 1970s uh, pep talk artist or whatever you call those people, but I say it that way because that's really how he operates. I thought that was going to hurt Tom, not because he should have been hurt. He did a very good job, but because of how Tom Brady operates. But the Raiders didn't do him wrong. They didn't do Antonio Pierce wrong. Both men get paid to not work now. And that was the contract they signed and they agreed to. So no harm, no foul. I don't mean it that way. But I think Spytek is perfect because he knows Brady. He played football with Brady, even though he's a Michigan fan. Ugh, I almost yelled "Go Green," which, if you know anything about the Spartans, go green. But anyways, but no, in all seriousness, he knows the game. He's very intelligent. And because of that pre-existing relationship with Tom Brady, I think it's going to work very well. I don't expect there to be friction. I think there would have been with Telesco, not because Tom is a fighter. That's not his nature, and not because I think Brady is a guy out looking for a fight. I just think Brady knows where he wants to go, and he wants to get there right now. And so it's important for him to have somebody that understands that. But I think Spytek, if I was grading it, um, I will never give anyone with no experience at a job an A. So the highest grade I would give him is a B. I think he'll earn an A. When his time in the Raiders is over, I'll be shocked if I don't give him an A. But that's just how my grading system goes. Let's turn attention now to Pete Carroll. I thought it was a brilliant press conference for a lot of different ways. Um, he's very jacked up. He was asked multiple different ways. You've done so much. Why? He kept saying it's because I love to compete. He loves the game. He talked about going to his grandson's JV and varsity football games this year and going to watch his boys coach and all of it. And I love it. And I thought it was an injection. He said something today that I think would go over a lot of people's head, but I can tell you it didn't miss on the players. In fact, I had one player text me why during the press conference when he said it, F yes or F yeah. You can figure the F out. And it was when he talked about we only want people here that want to compete. I thought that was fascinating. I think that's something that's been missing here. Um, saw, of course, some Raiders players. I had a chance to talk to Cap, Colton Miller. Um, Nothing that I want to tell you just because there wasn't a camera. So in my world, if there's no camera, it's off the record. He didn't say anything bad. He was excited about Pete, but I'm not going to get into any more. But it was great to see, guys pretty jacked up and fired up about it. Max Crosby down there hugging on Spytek, hugging on Mark Davis, hugging on um, Pete Carroll. They referenced Max multiple times. I asked someone in the organization with direct knowledge about Max's contract and about obviously no deal. And the person looked me right in the eyes and said, Max is priority one. So if I was to say today, do I think Max um, will resign? Yes. If they keep Patrick Graham and Robbie Leonard, I don't expect any chance he goes anywhere else. If they keep one of them, I still think there's a great chance. And if they don't keep either one, I would guess 50-50. So but you don't make those decisions if you're the Raiders just on one guy, but I think he's a pretty significant, important guy. And but that's where that sits. Pete Carroll. Now I have known of Pete, not known him as a friend in any way, but interviewed him many times, been around him a lot of times. I've always found him to be genuine and very warm. Um, I find a lot of people to be that way, but in their role as head coach, like I'll give you an example. I know nobody wants to hear this, but Josh McDaniels is a tremendous father, a great husband, and a wonderful guy. I genuinely really like Josh. And I've known him a long time when he was a GA at Michigan State. Okay. He is not a warm, personal guy when he's in the role of head coach. It's not a gift for him. Doesn't make him a bad person. He's made tens of millions of dollars and he's a great offensive coordinator, but he's not that. Doesn't make him bad. And I know a lot of guys who get to that chair and the chair's bigger for them um, than maybe they could handle. I think you see some people who get the chair and then it changes them. I heard it said one time, and I think it was John Robinson of USC told. You remember that John Robinson? We were at a Detroit Lions football practice, and I don't remember his exact verbiage, but basically it was that either the chair changes you or you change the chair, but somebody's getting changed. And we were talking about culture. And what I would say to you is, Pete Carroll just changed the Raiders chair. Let me give you a couple of examples. I genuinely really like John Gruden. Um, John has never been anything other than warm and kind to me. I think he's a great football coach, but John is a kind of person that likes a little chaos. And sometimes I think, my own personal belief, I think there's times when his teams have underachieved a little bit because he was so acerbic. I think he almost turned some guys against him that didn't need to be. I remember one particular player who had a great career away from John Gruden that said to me, "That guy hates my guts." And I literally remember John talking about how much he loved him. So John, again, very successful coach, great coach, but I think the chair changes John a little bit. Um, Again, great coach. I think Tony Dungy changed the chair. Um, but you come to Pete Carroll, and this is a guy who is super energetic. He is a devoted husband and father. You know, his life is family, football. It's just what he lives. He's a ball coach. John Gruden was that way, but I think Pete's looking at how many people can I get on the train of the Raiders. I think John Gruden sometimes looked at how many guys can I get on my train. Both Super Bowl winners, both good men, both good coaches. It's just my analyzation of them. Pete Carroll sat in that chair today. Josh McDaniels, when he sat in that chair, looked scared. Um, Antonio Pierce looked. I remember walking away from Antonio Pierce's first press conference. I thought, ooh, he looked a little too sure, like this was going to be easy. And I think, yeah, I've shared the story with you before. Irvin Johnson once told me that He coached the Lakers for a short time, but he just couldn't do it because he's one of the greatest to ever play. And so he expected everyone to embrace and love the game the way he did. And that's just not reality in professional sports. Not everybody does. Some guys are here with all the skill in the world, all the heart in the world, all the love in the world. Max Crosby's that guy. Then there are some guys that maybe aren't the fastest, the biggest, or the strongest, but they have the biggest heart. And so they will themselves to victory. Then there are people who have all the skills. They don't seem to have the heart for the game. I don't have to name names. You can figure out who I'm talking about. Pete is that guy that sat in that chair today and he was able to recognize how big of a challenge it's going to be to put the Raiders where they need to be. Again, I didn't see that last year from Antonio, and that's not a slam. He didn't know what he didn't know. But he also is a guy sitting in that chair with total confidence, but it wasn't arrogance. It was a complete different air. I thought this was a home run for the Raiders today. Very, very good. Then I want to talk about Mark Davis. Um, I laugh when my critics will send me emails about me kissing Mark's rear. I have no reason to. I am a long time, decades long journalist, and I'm a professional. And I have called Mark out when Mark deserved it. In fact, when I first started, people thought I hated the guy, and which was not true, by the way. But I have had a front row seat to watching how Mark changed over these last 6 years. Now, remember, he went through Gruden, he went through Bisaccia, went through Josh McDaniels, went through Antonio Pierce. Now he's on to Pete Carroll. So this is 6 years, five guys. And I'm going to be writing a story here in a few weeks about the deep dive into this, but how Mark projected himself. I shared a story with you several months ago. Maybe it was a month ago. I don't know. Time's running together here. Bear with me. But I shared a story with you in which a coach who interviewed for a job here said to me when he walked out of the interview room, he literally prayed and he said, I said a novena and asked God, please don't let them offer this job. I don't want this job, but if they offer, I've got to take it. It's not fair to my agent. And he told me, I mean, he literally told me, had both my shoulders. He said, it was a gift from God. I didn't get it. And he told me about this guy has great respect for Mark Davis, but he shared with me um, what Mark was like in the interview process. So I talked to two or three other people and wanted to get their input. How was he this time? And somebody who has had access to Mark in the interview process, both before and in this, told me he was significantly different. He leaned forward in his chair. He was zeroed in. He was did very little talking, but when he asked something, it was poignant. Um, they just told me how proud they were of him. I know Raider fan has a love-hate relationship with Mark that's never going to be repaired till he wins a Super Bowl. I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. But what I think is cool is he understands it. And if you were to say to Mark Davis today, Mark, you can win the Super Bowl next year, but then you have to sell the Raiders. I believe Mark would do it. That's how bad he wants to win a Super Bowl. I believe if you said to Mark, Mark, you can win the Super Bowl this year, but then you have to walk away from the Raiders. You have your own personal wealth, but you have to leave everything with the Raiders. That's the Raiders, and you get $1 million. I believe he would do it. That is his will to win. And I had a chance to visit with him today. It was we visited on camera, which you can watch. We visited off camera, which is always off the record. So I'm not going to tell you anything that he said. But I walked away from that. I walked away from that and just passing on to him some things I learned. We'll leave it there. And I was happy today for Mark Davis. I have said to you all along, I'm not a Raider fan. My whole family is now, the whole dadgum group of them. But I do root for good people. And Mark's good people. He cares about people. And it bothers him that Raider fans haven't had a Super Bowl. It bothers him the cost of tickets, which is not his fault. He has them very reasonably priced. They just get bought up and then get sold. I think a lot bothers him, and I respect him for that. And I think he genuinely cares. He is a humble billionaire, and I admire how he handles the process, the way he handled this process. He wasn't afraid to tell Brady no, but he also wasn't just telling Brady no because his ego wanted to prove he was the boss. And I think the Raiders walk out of this with a proven Hall of Fame coach. Proven. Everything that you would have wanted in a head coach, you got it, maybe outside of his age. Some of you are way too young to remember this, and don't get political on me, but years ago, Ronald Reagan was running against Walter Mondale in 1984 for president. And Ronald Reagan was up there in years. And they asked him about his age at the presidential debate. And Ronald Reagan, whether you're a Republican or not, even Walter Mondale cracked up laughing. But he said, I refuse to let my opponent's youth and inexperience, define this election. And everybody laughed. Walter Mondale laughed. Everybody laughed. Um, it was that kind of moment with Pete where he just made a joke about his age on, I think, two or three times. It was very lighthearted of him. He talked about putting together a staff. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to have an article coming probably tomorrow. If not, it'll be Wednesday. I'm going to tell you this right now. I believe that he is making an effort to keep Patrick Graham. I'll just say it. I know that he has made an effort to keep Patrick Graham. Okay. That would be phenomenal. If Patrick can't get a head coach job, I would love to see Patrick and Robbie Leonard back here. I think it just makes the Raiders better. I understand though, how it will all go down, and we're going to just have to wait and see. Pete Carroll is a great communicator and a tremendous recruiter. When he was at USC, he was considered the best recruiter in America. We're going to find out if he's lost that being in the NFL, because it's going to take a very strong recruiting process to keep PG and Robbie Leonard. And it's very important that they do it. So tomorrow's podcast, we're going to be joined by my buddy Robert Spillane. So excited for you to get to know the guy I know, my friend, to get to see his love of the game in a whole different way. But a lot of great stuff for you coming. And thank you for listening. God bless all of you. I hope that you're well, and I hope your families are well. And I hope 2025 has started in a fantastic way for you. God bless you all.